Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to do something a little bit complicated using some neat techniques to do this quick and easy for us. What we're going to be modeling now is a rope. Now, I know that sounds simple, but a lot of people wonder how in the world you go ahead and model a rope. Well, let me show you what rope I'm talking about. Let's hold down Alt and hit 6 on keyboard to open up an image clip viewer. Let's go to File, Import. Now you should see an image called the rope. Let's go ahead and open that up, and you can see what I'm talking about here. This is a picture of rope used for rappelling off walls and sliding out of helicopters, and it's used for a lot of general utilities and things. Now, this kind of rope at first glance seems pretty simple, but when you think about it, how in the world do you model rope that looks like that? Well, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do that using XSI. And by the end of the video, you're actually going to be pretty surprised as to how easy XSI can make it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck this window away simply by double-clicking the name bar up here. So I can go back to it very quickly and check it out for reference. Double-click it, tuck it away, double-click it, bring it back out. Okay, so what we're going to do is hit F12 over here on our camera viewport. And we're going to need something to use as rope. Now, if we look at our rope, the closest shape that the rope resembles, if we go over here to primitive polygon mesh, it's not a cone or a cube, it's a cylinder. So let's start off with a cylinder primitive object. Let me tuck that away, don't need it now. I'm going to also hide the grid by hitting G on the keyboard, I don't need it. I'm going to go to shaded mode, and there's my cylinder. Now my cylinder, as it is not going to be very useful for a rope. First of all, it's about the size of a thumb or something like that, so this thing is not going to do me very good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the base and the V subdivisions, knock them down to 1 and 1. The U subdivisions is perfectly fine at 8. We don't want more than 8. We don't really need more than 8. The next thing we have to do is control the height of this cylinder. So right now the height is set to 4 units, but we're going to need something that's a lot longer than that because this is going to be a long piece of rope. So let's crank this all the way up, and the most the slider goes to is 50. Well, let's go to higher than that. Let's try something like 200. And if we look down and then look up, we can see it's pretty long. Will it be long enough to do what we're trying to do? Maybe. Let's just go ahead and do that. Let's change the radius as well because the radius is a bit too thick, in my opinion anyways. So I'm going to knock down the radius to about half that size, so to about 0.5. So now it looks like it's even longer. Okay, so looking at a reference image here, comparing the size or the diameter of this rope to our cylinder here, this rope would obviously be much longer than an average human male is tall. But it's still not that long. It's not going to be as long as the rope in our picture. And the rope in our picture here is pretty long. I don't know how long this rope is, but I'm willing to bet it's probably going to be well over 20 meters or something like that. Maybe it might be 20 meters. I'm not sure. I really don't know. It's just a wild guess, honestly, to be truthful with you. So I think this rope is going to work just fine. And you can make your rope longer, but the point of this tutorial is to see how in the world to model the rope. So the length of the rope is really something that you can do on your own. All you have to do is change the height over here from 200 to something higher than 200. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 200 because I think 200 is probably going to work out pretty well. So let me close that PPG. Okay, so here's our cylinder. Next thing we need to do is knock the cylinder down on its side. It's not totally necessary, but I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to bring the grid out so I can at least have some kind of reference to see an imaginary floor. I'm going to come in here and turn this on the X axis here. And I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. You can do that by typing in 90 over here in the X channel next to rotation here in the transform area of the MCP. So you can type in 90, hit enter, and XSI will go ahead and flip this so-called rope on its side 90 degrees. Okay, so now with that done, the next thing to do is to come over here. Let's go to Polygon raycasting mode by hitting U on the keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and select these polygons here, and then I'm going to hit F on the keyboard, and that's going to zoom in on those selected components. That's F on the keyboard to frame in on whatever selected object or components you have. In this case, those polygons. Now, the polygons that I actually want to edit and manipulate here are these polygons that run along the diameter of this rope, not the ones at the end. So I'm going to select this polygon, Alt and middle mouse button click this polygon. That way I select the entire loop of polygons, or the ring of polygons, all the way around the diameter of this so-called rope. I say so-called because it doesn't look anything like a rope so far. So until it earns its right to be called a rope, it's going to be called the so-called rope. Okay, now what I have to do is extrude these polygons. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go down here to extrude along axis. And when I do that, you're going to get this funny result. That's not what we're after. What we have to do is come over here to where it says merge in the extrude PPG and uncheck the merge option off. And now we'll see that the polygons are jumping out like this, and it looks kind of like a gear or a cogwheel. That's exactly what we want. But let's reduce the length a little bit here to something more like this. Looks okay. I'm also going to go to the inset amount over here, which is right now set to 0, and I'm going to go ahead and decrease it into the negative numbers. So something more like this is pretty good. Now this looks really weird. That's because we're working with sub D's, so this isn't how the sub D is going to look in the end. To see how the sub D looks, let's hit the plus key on the number pad of our keyboard a few times to subdivide this. Now it looks very, very strange. Don't worry about it. Let's hold down Control and hit the plus key again, and that toggles on the wireframe cage. So now we can see what in the world's going on here. And what we need to do is add some detail to this. So that's actually going to be pretty easy to do. Switch to edge mode by hitting E on the keyboard. Let's close this PPG. It's just cluttering our view here and we don't need it. Let's go over here and look at this thing from the side, and by hitting E on the keyboard and going to edge mode with rectangular selection, let's draw rectangular selection on top of these edges. So now all these edges are selected. Now what I'm going to do is pretty simple. I'm going to right click on the object, and I'm going to go to split subdivide edges evenly. I could have done a split, but I'm going to do it this way instead. Then I'm going to increase the subdivisions to 3. I'm going to close the PPG, and our subdivisions are somewhere in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit T to go to tag point mode. I'm going to drag select and make sure I select all these points over here, and I'm just going to move them over here. And I want them to be pretty close to the tip of the rope. Right about here is pretty good. So now what I want to do is I want to grab the other points on the opposite end, and I want to move those over here. So move those just like we did on the other side. Move them toward the end of the rope. Okay, perfect. Alright, so we got our long piece of rope. And if we draw render region by holding down Q on the keyboard, we can see how our rope is coming along, and it's not looking too great, but it's looking more interesting than before. Ropes in real life look the way they do. They look like this because they're twisted. It's just a bunch of fibers of rope that are twisted and twisted and twisted and twisted and twisted, and together they make this very strong piece of rope that can hold a guy when he's jumping out of a helicopter or rappelling down a mountain cliff or whatever it is you're using your rope for. Okay, so